There is a particular kind of silence that exists only in penthouse apartments, overlooking a glittering, indifferent city. It's the silence of money, a thick, soundproofed quiet that's supposed to feel like peace, but often feels like a cage. I was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of my husband's apartment, looking down at the river of headlights 20 stories below, wrapped in a silk gown that cost more than my first car. It was a beautiful prison, and my mother-in-law, Genevieve, was the warden. "The color is a bit bold for you, isn't it, dear?" she had said when she'd seen the gown. A deep sapphire blue. But I suppose when one is trying to make an impression, one must use every tool at one's disposal. Every compliment from Genevieve was a beautiful, jewel-encrusted dagger, and she knew exactly where to slide it between your ribs. For 3 years, since the day I had married her son, Julian, I had been her favorite pincushion. Have you ever been in a relationship where you had to constantly fight a battle against your partner's family, and your partner felt more like a referee than a teammate? A referee who was afraid of the other team. At that, it's a lonely, exhausting place to be. Give this video a thumbs up if you've ever felt like you were fighting alone. My husband is a good man. I need you to know that. Julian is kind, gentle, and he loves me with a soft, steady devotion that I, for a long time, mistook for strength. He's the scion of the Croftwood family, a name that in our city is synonymous with old money, real estate development, and a quiet, formidable power. He was born into a world of privilege so profound that he is almost blind to it. I was not. I grew up in a small town 3 states away, a place of Friday night football games and county fairs. My father was a mechanic who owned his own garage, and my mother was a librarian. My world was one of grease-stained hands, the quiet smell of old books, and the understanding that everything you had in life was something you had to earn with your own 2 hands. When I met Julian in business school, our worlds collided. He was fascinated by my drive, by my ambition to start my own marketing firm. I was charmed by his quiet intelligence and his genuine kindness, a quality that seemed so at odds with the powerful, intimidating family he came from. We fell in love, and like a fool, I thought our love would be enough to conquer the chasm between our worlds. I had forgotten about the gatekeeper, Genevieve Croftwood. From our very first meeting, she made it clear that I was not just an outsider. I was an unfortunate and temporary circumstance. She was a woman carved from ice, impeccably dressed, surgically precise with her insults, and in complete and utter control of her son. She looked at me not as a potential daughter-in-law, but as a hostile merger she had to find a way to block. She never raised her voice. She never had to. Her weapons were a raised eyebrow, a pitying smile, a well-placed, backhanded compliment. She would helpfully correct my choice of wine at dinner. She would tell me my business sounded absolutely charming in a tone that suggested it was a lemonade stand, run by a particularly slow child. She was a master of a quiet, psychological warfare that left me feeling small and inadequate, and left Julian completely oblivious. "Just try to ignore her. He'd say to me after a particularly brutal family dinner. "That's just how she is. She treats everyone like that." "She doesn't treat you like that, Julian," I would argue, my frustration mounting. "She treats me like something she scraped off the bottom of her shoe." "She'll come around," he would always promise, taking me in his arms. "Once she gets to know you, once she sees how amazing you are, she'll love you, I promise." He believed it, and for a long time, I tried to believe it, too. I tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law. I dressed the part. I learned the names of her charity board members. I smiled through the endless, subtle insults. I was trying so hard to fit into this new, gilded life that I had almost forgotten the old one, the one before Julian, the one that had belonged to me and Jax. Jax. Just thinking his name felt like a betrayal, like a ghost stepping into the cold, sterile light of my new life. We had grown up together in that small town of Friday night lights. Our fathers had worked together at the local garage. We were from the same world, the same dirt. Our love wasn't a quiet, gentle thing like what I had with Julian. It was a wildfire. It was passionate and reckless and all-consuming. He was the boy with the restless energy and the old soul eyes, the boy who could fix any engine, who taught me how to drive stick shift in his beat-up old pickup truck, who kissed me for the first time on a humid summer night by the lake, the smell of gasoline still on his hands. We were going to get out of that town together. We were going to see the world. We had our whole lives planned out. But the world had other plans. When we were 19, the recruiters came, the army. They offered him a path, a purpose, a way out that was faster and more explosive than the one we had planned. And Jax, with that restless, searching energy of his, couldn't resist. He enlisted. He was a natural. He was strong, smart, disciplined. He excelled. And 2 years into his service, he was chosen for something else. Special Forces, Green Berets. The man who came home on leave after that training was not the same boy who had left. He was still my Jax. But there was a new hardness in his eyes. A new, quiet, watchful stillness about him that hadn't been there before. He was carrying a world of secrets he couldn't share, a weight I couldn't help him lift. Our love was still there, a fierce, burning thing, but his life was no longer his own. It was a life of sudden deployments, of long, silent periods where I wouldn't hear from him for weeks, of a danger so profound he could never even speak of it. The breakup was a slow, agonizing, mutual surrender. It happened over a crackling, long-distance phone call, him in some dusty, undisclosed location on the other side of the world, and me in my college dorm room. "I can't do this to you anymore, Isla," he'd said, his voice a low, rough sound, full of a pain that mirrored my own. "I can't ask you to wait for a man who might never come home. I can't ask you to live your life on hold for a ghost. You deserve more. You deserve a real life, a safe one." "I don't want safe, Jax." I had sobbed into the phone. "I want you." "I know," he'd whispered, and I could hear his own heart breaking through the static. "But you can't have me, not all of me. The best part of me belongs to the army now, and it's not fair to give you what's left." We had said our goodbyes. We had cried, and then we had hung up the phone, and a massive, vital part of my life had simply ended. I hadn't seen or spoken to him in almost 9 years. He was a ghost, a memory from a different life, the life of a girl who smelled like engine grease and believed in wildfires. A year later, I met Julian, and I chose safety. I chose the calm, gentle love over the all-consuming fire. I chose the man whose biggest battle was a passive-aggressive dinner with his mother, not a firefight in a foreign desert. I had convinced myself that this was what it meant to be an adult, to be happy. But as I stood there in my sapphire gown, looking out at the city lights, I felt a profound sense of loss. I had this beautiful, gilded life, and I was so lonely. The girl who had loved the boy from the Special Forces felt like a stranger to me now, a braver, more passionate version of myself that I had packed away. My thoughts were interrupted by Julian entering the room. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You look beautiful," he whispered, kissing my neck. "But you've been standing here for 20 minutes. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile as I turned to face him. "Just nervous, I guess." "About what?" "About your mother," I said honestly. "The annual Children's Hospital Gala is her Super Bowl. It's the biggest night of her social calendar, and you know what that means." "I know," he sighed, his face clouding over. "It means she'll be at her most Genevieve-like." He squeezed my hands. "But this year will be different. I've spoken to her. I told her I wanted tonight to be perfect. For us. I told her to please be on her best behavior. She promised she would be." I looked at him, at his kind, handsome, hopeful face. He was a good man. He wanted to believe his mother was capable of change, but I knew better. Genevieve Croftwood didn't change. She just reloaded. "Okay," I said, mustering a smile that felt brittle. "I'll try to believe you." An hour later, as we were about to leave, Julian's phone rang. It was the hospital. An emergency with one of his patients. "I am so sorry, he said, his face a mask of guilt as he hung up. "I have to go. I have to be there. You go on ahead to the gala. I'll meet you there as soon as I possibly can. I promise." And just like that, I was on my own. I was about to walk into the lion's den, into the glittering, judgmental heart of Genevieve's world, without my human shield. A sense of deep, profound dread settled over me. "It's okay," I said, straightening his tie. "Go. Be a good doctor. I'll be fine. I can handle your mother." But as I watched him rush out the door, I felt a tremor of fear. I was about to face the queen in her own castle, on her most important night, and I had a terrible, sinking feeling that tonight my armor wasn't going to be nearly thick enough. Walking into the grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel for the annual Children's Hospital Gala felt like stepping onto a different planet. I was alone. Julian's last-minute emergency at the hospital meant I had to face this glittering, judgmental world without him, and I felt as exposed as a raw nerve. The room was a sea of designer gowns, old money jewels, and the quiet, confident hum of the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars dripped from the ceiling, casting a brilliant, unforgiving light on everything. This was not my world. This was Genevieve's kingdom, and tonight was her coronation. She saw me the moment I walked in. She was holding court near the grand staircase, a regal figure in a severe, silver gown that made her look like a beautiful, elegant icicle. She detached herself from her circle of admirers and glided towards me, her smile as bright and as cold as the diamonds at her throat. "Isla, darling," she said, her voice a low, musical purr that carried easily over the orchestra's gentle waltz. "You came, all by yourself. How brave." She kissed the air on either side of my face. "That poor husband of yours. A doctor's work is never done. Is it well?" she added, her eyes doing a quick, dismissive sweep of my sapphire blue gown. "Do try to stay out of trouble." It was a warning disguised as a pleasantry, a threat wrapped in a silk bow. Welcome to my life. For the next hour, I navigated the party with the strained, fixed smile of a diplomat in a hostile country. I made small talk. I admired the ice sculpture. I pretended to be fascinated by conversations about stock portfolios and summering in the Hamptons. All the while, I could feel Genevieve's eyes on me. She was a hawk, circling, waiting for me to make a mistake. She would swoop in, always at the most inopportune moments, to deliver one of her signature little cuts. While I was speaking to one of Julian's aunts, Genevieve joined the conversation. "Isla was just telling me about her marketing business," the aunt said kindly. "Oh, yes," Genevieve chimed in, her smile radiant. "Her charming little company. It's so creative. She designs websites for florists. I believe it's a wonderful hobby. She made my career, the business I had built from the ground up, sound like a quaint pastime, like macrame or scrapbooking." Later, she steered me towards a group of her friends, all powerful women who sat on various museum and charity boards. "You all must meet Isla," she announced. "She's the one I was telling you about, the one with the very authentic background. Her father owns a garage. Can you imagine? So refreshing." They all looked at me with the polite, fascinated curiosity of tourists, observing a local curiosity. I had to stand there and smile, my cheeks burning, as they asked me questions that were dripping with condescension. A garage, how? Gritty? Is it very dirty? My life, my history, my family, it was all just a charming, rustic anecdote for her to entertain her friends with. And Julian wasn't there. I was alone, fending off her attacks with nothing but a polite smile and a will of iron. The final, catastrophic confrontation happened near the silent auction tables. Genevieve cornered me while I was speaking with Mr. Abercrombie, a real estate magnate in his 80s and, more importantly, the single largest donor to the Children's Hospital. He was the biggest fish in the room, and Genevieve was determined to show him who was in charge. She approached us, looping her arm through mine in a gesture that was meant to look affectionate, but felt like an arrest. "Mr. Abercrombie," she said, her voice like honey, "I'm so glad you've gotten a chance to meet my daughter-in-law. Isn't she a breath of fresh air? She has absolutely no filter. She just says whatever pops into her head. I find it so invigorating." She was painting me as an uncultured, unsophisticated child in front of the one man she needed to impress most. All my polite smiles, all my careful conversation, all my efforts to be the perfect, supportive daughter-in-law were being erased in an instant. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. I had spent 3 years swallowing her insults, enduring her condescension, all for the sake of a man who was never there to defend me when it mattered. I was done. I turned to her, my own smile as cold and as bright as hers. Actually, Genevieve, I said, my voice quiet but clear, cutting through her performance. Where I was raised, we were taught that kindness and honesty are the most important parts of decorum. We were taught not to say things behind people's backs that we wouldn't say to their faces. I find that invigorating. It was a direct hit, the first I had ever landed. The serene, confident mask on Genevieve's face faltered. A flash of pure, venomous fury appeared in her eyes. She was not used to being challenged, especially not by me, and certainly not in front of Mr. Abercrombie. The air between us crackled with tension. It was in that split second of silent, furious warfare that it happened. I turned away from her, my movements sharp and angry, and my elbow jostled the arm of a passing waiter, or maybe I bumped my own hand against the table. I don't even know. All I know is that in the next instant, my full glass of red wine, a deep, blood-red Cabernet, was no longer in my hand. It was arcing through the air in a perfect, horrifying, slow-motion wave, directly onto the pristine, white expanse of Mr. Abercrombie's tuxedo shirt. The splash of red on white was like a gunshot in the silent, tense moment. Mr. Abercrombie looked down at his shirt with a look of stunned disbelief, and Genevieve saw her opportunity. This was it, the public mistake she had been waiting for 3 years. She seized it with the glee of a predator pouncing on wounded prey. She didn't gasp, she shrieked, a loud, theatrical, attention-grabbing sound that made the entire ballroom fall silent. The orchestra faltered, a violin squeaking into silence. Every single head turned in our direction. "Oh, my heavens," she cried, her voice ringing with melodramatic horror. "Isla, look at what you have done." I was frozen, my empty wine glass still in my hand. "Mr. Abercrombie, I am so sorry," I stammered. Reaching for a napkin, it was a complete accident. An accident. Genevieve's voice was now a booming instrument of public condemnation. She was no longer speaking to me, but to the entire room, to her entire social kingdom. An accident. The girl is completely drunk, clumsy and drunk, and she has assaulted our guest of honor. I have never been so embarrassed, so humiliated in my entire life. She was putting on a performance worthy of an Oscar. She rushed to Mr. Abercrombie's side, dabbing at his wine-soaked shirt with a napkin, making the stain worse. All the while, she kept up her running commentary, directed at the captive audience of shocked, silent onlookers. "This is what I have to endure," she lamented, her voice trembling with fake despair. "This is the chaos she brings into our lives. This is what my son brought into this family." I was standing in the center of a silent circle of judgment. I was the star of my own public execution. I looked around the room, my face burning with a shame so hot it felt like a fever. I saw the shocked faces, the whispers behind elegantly gloved hands, the looks of pity and disgust. I looked desperately towards the entrance, praying that Julian would walk through the doors, that he would see what was happening and come to my rescue. But the doorway was empty. He wasn't here. I was completely, utterly, and devastatingly alone. My spirit, which had been so resilient for so long, finally broke. I couldn't fight her, not here, not like this. She had won. I just stood there, mute, as she continued her tirade, systematically dismantling my character, my reputation, my dignity, in front of the most powerful people in the city. When she had finally exhausted her performance of righteous indignation, she turned, her face a mask of cold, triumphant fury. Her eyes scanned the room, and then she saw them, the uniformed security staff, stationed by the exits. She raised a single, imperious finger and pointed it directly at me. Her voice, now cold and clear and full of an absolute, chilling authority, echoed through the silent, cavernous ballroom. "Security," she commanded, her voice ringing like a death knell. "I want this woman removed from my event. Now." The word "now" echoed in the cavernous ballroom, sharp and final as a guillotine's blade. For a split second, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The orchestra was silent. The clinking of glasses was silent. The murmuring river of high society chatter was silent. There were 300 people in that room, and the only sound I could hear was the frantic, panicked drumming of my own heart. I was the center of attention, a specimen pinned to a board for all to see. The bright, unforgiving light from the chandeliers seemed to zero in on me, illuminating my shame. My sapphire blue dress felt garish and loud. The wine stain on Mr. Abercrombie's shirt felt like a bloody wound I had inflicted. And then they began to move. Two men in sharp black suits, identifiable as security only by the small, coiled earpieces they wore, detached themselves from the wall near the main entrance. They didn't rush. They moved with a calm, deliberate professionalism that was somehow more terrifying than open aggression. They were not bouncers at a dive bar. They were professionals, and they were coming for me. Their slow, measured walk across the vast, polished dance floor was a funeral march. Every step they took was a step closer to the final, physical act of my humiliation. They were going to put their hands on me. They were going to lead me, the disgraced daughter-in-law, out of this palace of wealth and power like a common criminal. My mind was a screaming chaos of panicked thoughts. This can't be happening. This is a nightmare. I'm going to wake up. But it was real, the pitying, horrified, and in some cases, smugly satisfied faces of the city's elite were all real. And in that moment of pure, primal terror, my eyes began a frantic, desperate search of the room. I was looking for one person. My husband, my partner, my protector, Julian. He had promised he would be here. He had promised he would handle his mother. He had promised this year would be different. I scanned the crowd, my eyes darting from face to face, searching for his familiar, kind features. Where are you, Julian? Please, please be here. Please, do something. And then I saw him. He wasn't in the main crowd. He was standing near a side entrance, halfway in the shadows. He must have just arrived, likely drawn by the sudden, unnatural silence that had fallen over the gala. His face was pale, his eyes wide with horror. He was taking in the scene, his mother, standing like a furious empress, her arm pointed directly at me, Mr. Abercrombie, looking stunned and wine-stained, and the two security guards, closing in on me. Our eyes met across the vast, silent ballroom. The look on my face, I'm sure, was a raw, silent scream. It was a plea that contained every hope and every fear I had. Help me. Julian, please. This is it. This is the moment. Say something, do something, be my husband. Be the man you promised you would be. He saw me, I know he did. His eyes were locked on mine, and I watched the war happen on his face. I saw the horror at what his mother was doing. I saw the sympathy, the love he had for me. But I saw something else, too, something stronger. I saw the deep, ingrained, lifelong fear he had of his mother. I saw the paralysis of a man who had never, not once in his life, successfully defied her. He opened his mouth. I saw his lips form my name, a silent Isla. He took a half-step forward. Out of the shadows, my heart leaped with a desperate, pathetic hope. He's going to do it. He's finally going to do it. And then he stopped. He hesitated. He looked from my pleading, desperate face to his mother's furious, commanding one, and he froze. The half-step he had taken was all he had. He retreated back into the shadows, his face a mask of anguished indecision. He was paralyzed, utterly, completely, and uselessly paralyzed. He was not going to save me. Have you ever looked at the person who is supposed to be your number one? Your ride or die, your partner in all things, and in the single most important moment of your life? Realized, with a clarity that is as cold and as sharp as death, that they are not going to show up for you. It's a different kind of heartbreak. It's not the passionate, fiery pain of a fight. It's the cold, quiet, hollowing out of an illusion dying. And that night, in the middle of a grand ballroom, under the light of a dozen crystal chandeliers, my illusion died a very public, very brutal death. Genevieve was my adversary. I expected her to attack me. But Julian was my husband. I had expected him to defend me. His betrayal, his silent, cowardly inaction, was a wound far deeper and far more painful than anything his mother could have inflicted with her words or her commands. She had called security on me. but he was the one who had truly thrown me to the wolves. The fight went out of me, the adrenaline, the fear, the anger, it all just drained away, leaving behind a profound, empty sense of resignation. This is it, I thought. This is the cage I chose. This is the price of admission. I was done. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was just going to let it happen. I was going to let these two men in their black suits take my arms and lead me out of this room, out of this life. It was easier than continuing to fight a battle that I now knew. With absolute certainty, I would always be fighting alone. The two guards had reached me now. They stood on either side of me, their presence large and official. They were professionals. Their faces were impassive. But I could see a flicker of pity in the eyes of the younger one. "Ma'am," the first guard said, his voice a low, respectful murmur, so as not to cause more of a scene. "If you'll please come with us." I looked at him. I looked at his partner. I looked across the room one last time at my husband, a statue hidden in the shadows, my jailer. I took a deep breath. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I was ready to surrender. And just as I was about to take my first step on my final walk of shame, a new voice cut through the silence. It wasn't loud, it wasn't a shout, but it was filled with a calm, absolute authority that made every single person in the room, including the two guards beside me, freeze in place. "Stand down." The voice came from my left. It was directed at the two guards. The command was simple, quiet, and utterly non-negotiable. The guards stopped instantly, their training kicking in. They turned toward the source of the command. My head turned. 2. A man was walking towards us. He was dressed in the same sharp, black suit as the other security personnel, but he wore it differently. He moved differently. The other guards were a presence. This man was a force. He moved with a quiet, coiled energy, a predatory grace that seemed utterly out of place amidst the glittering opulence of the ballroom. He walked past the gawking socialites and the frozen waiters. His eyes, I noticed, were a piercing, intelligent gray, and they were fixed, not on Genevieve, not on the guards, but directly on me. He came to a stop a few feet in front of us. He looked at the two guards. "I'll handle this," he said, his voice still quiet, but with an undercurrent of steel that left no room for argument. The guards just nodded and took a half step back, instantly deferring to his authority. He was clearly their superior, the head of security. Genevieve, furious at this interruption, at this challenge to her absolute power, stormed towards him. "And who in the hell do you think you are?" she demanded. I gave an order. "I want this woman out of my party. Now," the man didn't even look at her. He just kept his eyes on me, and as he stood there, under the brilliant, unforgiving light of the chandeliers, my entire world, which had already shattered once tonight, shattered again in a completely new and impossible way. My brain began to process the impossible, the set of his jaw, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, a tiny white line I had traced with my finger 1,000 times, the quiet, watchful stillness that I had once mistaken for weakness in my husband, but now recognized as the profound, coiled calm of a man who was in complete control of any and every situation. His face was leaner, older, harder. There were new lines around his eyes, but they were the same eyes that I had looked into 1,000 times, eyes that I had seen filled with passion, with laughter, and with a heartbreaking sadness. My breath caught in my throat, the world tilted on its axis. It was Jax, my Jax, the boy from my hometown, the boy who had joined the Special Forces, my first love, the ghost I had been trying to forget for almost a decade. And he was standing right in front of me, the head of security at my mother-in-law's gala, the one person who had been sent to throw me out. My brain felt like a computer that had just been fed a line of impossible, contradictory code. It crashed. The glittering ballroom, the horrified faces, the simmering rage of my mother-in-law, it all dissolved into a meaningless, buzzing static. In that moment, there was only him, Jax. It couldn't be him. Jax was a ghost. He was a memory from a different lifetime, a different me, a boy who smelled of motor oil and sunshine, a boy from a small town with dusty roads and big dreams. He did not belong here, in this sterile, perfumed world of old money and cold smiles. He was a wildfire, and this was a room full of priceless, flammable antiques. As Genevieve continued to hiss at him, my mind plunged backward through time, a freefall into the past. I wasn't in a sapphire gown at the St. Regis anymore. I was 17 again, lying on my back on the hood of his beat-up 1978 Ford pickup truck. Our hands sticky from shared cherry cola. We were parked at Miller's Overlook, the highest point in our county, looking down at the scattered lights of our small town. "See that cluster of lights over there," he had said, his voice full of a restless, yearning energy. "That's it. That's everything, and it's not enough. It's not enough for you." He was always like that. He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself yet. He saw a future for me that was bigger than our small town. He was the one who pushed me to apply to the business school in the city, the one who believed in my ambition when everyone else, including me, thought it was just a dream. Our love was a thing of grit and gasoline. It was summers spent helping him rebuild an engine, my hands stained with grease as he patiently explained the difference between a piston and a valve. It was winters huddled together under a blanket in his truck, watching drive-in movies, the dialogue lost to the sound of our own laughter. It was a real, tangible thing. A love built not on shared status or strategic advantage, but on a shared history and a fierce, protective loyalty. Then he had enlisted. The boy who was always looking for a bigger world to conquer had found the ultimate path out. The army. I was proud, and I was terrified. He left for basic training, and the letters he sent were full of a new, hard-won confidence. And then, 2 years later, he was chosen, Special Forces, the Green Berets. The man who came back on leave after that was different. The boy I loved was still there, in his eyes, in his slow, easy smile, but he was encased in a new layer of something I couldn't penetrate, a hardness, a quiet, watchful stillness. He had seen things he couldn't talk about, done things he couldn't share. The world he inhabited was one of shadows and secrets, and there was no room for me in it. Our breakup was the most painful, civilized, and loving conversation of my life. It happened over a staticky satellite phone connection, his voice coming to me from a world of sand and danger, 10,000 miles away. "It's not fair to you, Isla," he'd said, his voice rough with an emotion he was trying so hard to control. "This life, the man it turns you into, you deserve someone who can be there, someone who can give you all of himself. I can't do that anymore. A part of me will always belong to them now. I'll wait for you, Jax." I had sobbed, my tears soaking my dorm room pillow. "I don't care how long it takes. I'll wait." "Don't," he had whispered, and his voice finally broke. "Please don't wait for me. Go and live that big, brilliant life we always talked about. Go and be amazing. That's all I want for you. Just promise me you'll be happy." I had promised, and he had hung up, and I hadn't heard his voice again until tonight. "Do you hear me? I am the chair of this event. I am paying for your services, and I am giving you a direct order." Genevieve's shrill voice sliced through my memories, dragging me back to the present, back to the glittering ballroom and the impossible reality of the situation. Jax hadn't moved. He hadn't even looked at her while she was ranting. His eyes were still on me, a calm, unreadable expression on his face. He was assessing the situation, just like he had been trained to do. He was identifying the threat, and for the first time, I realized the threat wasn't me. He finally turned his head slowly and looked at my mother-in-law. He gave her a long, level, and completely unimpressed stare. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low, calm counterpoint to her screeching fury. "My firm, Praetorian Security Solutions, was hired by your gala's organizing committee to provide threat assessment and asset protection for this event, as per our contract." He was using corporate speak. It was a language she understood, and it completely disarmed her. "My professional assessment," he continued, his tone infuriatingly reasonable, "is that this woman," he gestured briefly towards me, "your daughter-in-law, does not constitute a threat to your guests or your assets. She appears to be the victim of a domestic dispute. Therefore, forcibly removing her from a private event at which she is an invited guest would be a significant liability. It would be a breach of our professional contract, and it would open both your committee and my firm up to a rather nasty lawsuit." Genevieve stared at him, her mouth opening and closing silently. She was a woman who was used to her commands being obeyed without question. The idea of a security guard, a member of the hired help, quoting contract law back to her was so outside of her realm of experience that she was momentarily speechless. Furthermore, Jax continued, pressing his advantage. My team's primary duty is to prevent a public disturbance. And right now, ma'am, with all due respect, the only person causing a public disturbance is you. It was a masterstroke. He had taken her power, her social standing, her wealth, and rendered them completely irrelevant. He had reframed the situation. She was no longer the powerful matriarch ejecting an unwanted guest. She was a hysterical woman making a scene at her own party. I looked past them, into the shadows where my husband was still standing, frozen. Julian was watching this man, this complete stranger, defend me with a calm authority that he himself had never been able to muster. The look on Julian's face was one of profound, abject shame, and in that moment, seeing the two of them, the man I had married and the man I had lost, I saw the truth. I had spent 3 years confusing Julian's gentle nature with strength. I had believed his promises that he would handle his mother, but his kindness was a weakness. His promises were empty. He was a prince, yes, but he would never be a king. He would always be a subject in his mother's court. Jax's strength was a different thing entirely. It wasn't loud, it wasn't aggressive. It was a quiet, unshakable core of absolute self-possession. He didn't need to shout. His authority was a palpable thing, a force that bent the room to his will, the love he had for me, the love that had been strong enough to let me go for my own good, was a universe away from the weak, conditional love my husband offered, a love that was not strong enough to protect me from his own mother. Seeing Jax again, seeing the man he had become, was like looking in a mirror and seeing the woman I was supposed to be, the woman I had been before I had allowed myself to be diminished, to be made smaller, to fit into this gilded cage. The sight of him didn't just give me hope, it reminded me of my own dormant strength. The fire wasn't out, it had just been sleeping. Genevieve, recovering from her shock, found her voice again. "This is outrageous," she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper now. "If you do not remove her this instant, I will see to it that your little security company is ruined. You will never work in this city again. Do you have any idea who I am?" Jax didn't even blink. He just gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. As if dealing with a petulant child, he was completely, utterly, and beautifully unintimidated. Then he turned his full attention back to me, ignoring my mother-in-law as if she were a piece of buzzing static. The hard, professional mask he had been wearing softened for just a fraction of a second, and he spoke to me, his voice now lower, more personal, a voice I hadn't heard in 9 years, but would have recognized anywhere. "Isla," he said softly, and the sound of my name in his mouth was a ghost I had forgotten existed. "Are you ready to leave?" The question hung in the air. He wasn't asking as the head of security. He was asking as Jax. And he wasn't asking me to leave because I was being thrown out. He was offering me an escape, a rescue. The choice was mine. Jax's question, spoken so softly in the deafening silence of the ballroom, was a lifeline thrown into the wreckage of my life. "Are you ready to leave?" He wasn't asking if I was ready to be escorted out in shame. He was asking if I was ready to be free. He was offering me a choice, a chance to reclaim a sliver of agency in a night that had been dedicated to stripping me of it entirely. I looked at him, at the ghost from my past who had just become the most solid, real person in my present. I looked at his calm, steady eyes that held no judgment, only a quiet, fierce protectiveness I hadn't seen in years. Then I looked past him, into the shadows, at my husband, Julian, a man still frozen in a paralysis of his own making. The choice was so clear, it was almost laughably simple. I turned my full attention back to Jax. The deep, soul-crushing despair that had hollowed me out just moments before was beginning to recede, replaced by a tiny, flickering ember of my old self, the girl who had believed in wildfires. "Yes," I said, my voice was a whisper, but it was the strongest, most certain word I had spoken in 3 years. "Yes, I am." A flicker of something relief. Understanding passed through Jax's eyes. He gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. The decision was made. The rest was just logistics. He placed a hand lightly on the small of my back, a gesture that was both professionally correct and deeply, personally reassuring. It wasn't a lover's touch, but it was the touch of a protector. It was a shield. He began to guide me forward, towards the main entrance on the far side of the ballroom. It was this simple, quiet act of defiance that finally broke Genevieve's spell of shock. The sight of me, her intended victim, not being dragged out in disgrace, but being calmly, respectfully escorted by the very man she had ordered to remove me, was more than her mind could handle. She exploded. "Where do you think you are going?" she shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly sound that tore through the elegant ballroom. "I gave you an order. You work for me. You will not move another inch." Jax didn't even turn around. He kept us moving forward, his hand a steady, warm pressure on my back. He spoke into the tiny microphone on his wrist cuff, his voice low and calm, a stark contrast to Genevieve's hysteria. "East exit," he said, escorting a principal. "Maintain a clear path." Suddenly, two more of his security team seemed to materialize out of the crowd, moving ahead of us, clearing a path through the gawking, frozen guests. They moved with a silent, fluid efficiency that spoke of years of training. This calm, professional dismissal of her authority sent Genevieve over the edge. She scurried after us, her expensive heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. She actually tried to grab Jax's arm. "Don't you ignore me, you insignificant little man," she spat, her face a mask of purple rage. "I will have your job. I will have your company blacklisted. You will be a security guard at a shopping mall by the time I am done with you. Do you know who I am?" Jax finally stopped. He turned to face her, his expression still utterly, infuriatingly calm. He looked down at her hand on his arm, and then he looked up and met her eyes. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an authority that made her instinctively drop her hand. "I know exactly who you are. You are the chairperson of a charity gala, a client. My team and I were hired to provide a professional service to ensure the safety of your guests and prevent any disturbances." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Right now, you are the single greatest disturbance in this room. My priority is to de-escalate this situation, which you have created, and to ensure the safety and well-being of this individual." He gestured to me, "whom you have been publicly harassing. Now, if you will excuse us, we are leaving. I suggest you go and enjoy your party." He had taken her power, her status, her wealth, and her rage, and he had calmly, professionally, and publicly dismissed them as irrelevant. He had reduced her to what she was, a hysterical woman causing a scene. It was at that moment, as we were about to turn and leave her standing there, speechless and humiliated, that Julian finally found his legs. He rushed forward from the shadows, his face a mess of panic and desperation. "Isla, wait," he cried, grabbing my free arm. His grip was weak, clammy. "Don't go. Please, we can fix this." I stopped. I turned to look at my husband, the man whose honor I was supposed to be in, whose name I carried, the man who had stood by and watched his mother tear me to shreds. I looked at his panicked, pleading face, and then I looked at Jax, who stood beside me, a silent, solid wall of quiet strength, a man who had known me for 2 hours of my new life and had already defended me more fiercely than my husband had in 3 years. The contrast was a physical thing. It was the difference between a hollow suit of armor and a shield of solid steel. "Fix this, Julian," I asked, and my voice was a stranger's. It was calm, it was quiet, and it was completely, utterly empty of the love I had once felt for him. "The time to fix this was 10 minutes ago, when your mother was screaming at me in front of 300 people, calling me a drunk. The time to fix this was any one of the dozens of times she has insulted and belittled me for the last 3 years. But you didn't. You stood in the shadows. You were silent." I froze. "I'm sorry," he pleaded, his eyes wet with tears of self-pity. "I didn't know what to do." "I know you didn't," I said, and a great, sad clarity washed over me. "And that's the problem. You never know what to do. But he does." I nodded towards Jax. This man, A man I haven't seen in almost a decade is doing the job you were supposed to do. He is making sure I am safe. He is standing up for me. I looked down at his hand, still clutching my arm. Please let go of me, Julian. My quiet dismissal, my utter lack of anger or hysterics, was more devastating to him than any fight could have been. He saw the truth in my eyes. He saw the end. His hand dropped from my arm as if it had been burned. He stumbled back, his face crumbling. He knew, in that moment, that our marriage was over. Let's go, I said softly to Jax. And we began our walk, the long walk across the ballroom floor. But it was not my walk of shame. It was Genevieve's. I held my head high. Jax was a silent, formidable presence at my side. And as we walked, I watched the faces of the guests. The shock was turning into something else, a kind of grudging respect. The whispers were no longer about my humiliation. They were about Genevieve's. They had all just witnessed the great Genevieve Croftwood, the untouchable queen of society, be publicly overruled, dismissed, and put in her place by the hired help. They had watched her own son stand by and let it happen. Her power was an illusion, and a man in a black suit had just shattered it with a few quiet words. The last thing I saw as we reached the grand entrance was Genevieve, standing frozen in the middle of her own perfect party, her face a mask of pure, impotent rage, and a few feet away, her son, Julian, stood alone, utterly broken. Then, the heavy doors of the ballroom swung shut behind us, cutting off the sounds of the party, cutting off the gilded cage, cutting off my old life. Jax and I stepped out into the cool, quiet night. I took a deep breath of the free air. It had never tasted so sweet. The rescue was over, but my own, real one, was just beginning. Jax escorted me through the grand lobby of the St. Regis, a silent, formidable shield at my side. The hotel staff, who had undoubtedly heard the commotion from the ballroom, averted their eyes, their faces a perfect blend of professionalism and avid curiosity. We didn't speak. There were no words for the surreal, impossible collision of our past and my present. Outside, the city air was cool and clean. A black SUV, sleek and anonymous, pulled up to the curb. One of Jax's men, dressed in the same sharp suit, got out and opened the rear passenger door for me. Jax stopped and turned to me, his face illuminated by the hotel's glowing marquee. His expression was no longer the impassive mask of the head of security. It was just Jax. And his eyes were full of a deep, complicated concern. "Are you really okay, Isla?" he asked, his voice low. I looked at him, at this ghost from my past, who had just become the most solid thing in my present. And I gave him the first truly honest answer I had given anyone in years. "No," I said, my voice quiet but steady, "but I will be." He nodded, a flicker of his old, familiar smile touching his lips. It was a smile of respect. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a simple, black business card. It read, Jackson Reed, CEO, Praetorian Security Solutions. Jackson Reed, I said, reading the name aloud. It felt strange on my tongue, so formal. "The world I live in now is a formal one," he said, his smile fading slightly. "If you need anything, Isla, anything at all, a security consultation for your business, a safe ride home, anything, you call that number." "Thank you, Jax," I whispered, for everything. "I told you a long time ago I'd always have your back," he said simply. "Some things don't change." He gave a small nod, a final, respectful goodbye. And then he turned and walked back into the hotel, back to his job, leaving me on the curb with his business card in my hand. I got into the waiting car, and as it pulled away, I didn't look back. Julian came home 3 hours later. He found me in the living room, sitting in the dark, my beautiful sapphire gown pulled around me on the floor like a puddle of ink. I had already taken off the heavy diamond necklace he had given me. It was sitting on the coffee table, looking like a cold, glittering snake. He didn't turn on the lights. He just stood in the doorway, a silhouette against the hallway light. "Isla," he whispered, "I am so sorry." "I know you are, Julian," I said, my voice flat and tired. He walked over and knelt in front of me, his face a mess of shame and regret. "I was a coward. I know that. I saw her, and I saw you, and I froze. I have never been more ashamed of myself in my entire life. I know, I said again. We can fix this, he pleaded, his voice cracking. I'll talk to her. I'll set her straight. I'll tell her if she ever speaks to you that way again. I'm done. I'll choose you. I swear. I will choose you. I looked at him then, at this kind, good, weak man whom I had loved, and I felt a profound, heartbreaking sadness. No, Julian, I said gently. You won't. You think you will, right now, in this moment. But she is your mother. She has spent your entire life conditioning you, controlling you. You will try, and she will manipulate you. She will cry. She will rage. She will guilt-trip you. And eventually, you will fold. You will come back to me and ask me to be the bigger person, to just let it go for the sake of peace. And we will be right back here again, in a year, or 5, because this is the dynamic, and it will never, ever change. No, he sobbed, burying his face in his hands. I can change, but I can't, I said. And the truth of it was a quiet, solid thing in my own heart. I can't live like this anymore. I can't spend the rest of my life as the secondary character in my own marriage. I can't spend my life waiting for my husband to be brave enough to defend me. I love you, Julian. But the man I married tonight, he let me fall, and the man who caught me, he was a stranger. I stood up. I think you should go and stay at your parents' house for a while, I said. The gilded cage was no longer my home. It was just his. The divorce was quiet, civil, and swift. Julian, to his credit, did not fight me on anything, racked with guilt and shame. He was generous to a fault. My lawyer had to talk him down from trying to give me half of his personal fortune. I didn't want his money. I had my own. I just wanted my freedom. The story of the gala incident, as it came to be known, became a quiet legend in the city's high society. Genevieve's public humiliation was absolute. The story of her being dressed down and dismissed by her own event security, all while her son stood by and did nothing, was a delicious piece of gossip that cemented her reputation not as a powerful matriarch, but as a cruel, petty tyrant. Her social power, which she had wielded for so long, was deeply and perhaps permanently damaged. I felt nothing about this. It was a world I no longer belonged to. A year has passed. I live in a small, bright apartment in a different part of the city, a place that feels like me. It's filled with books and art and comfortable, slightly mismatched furniture. It is a home, not a showroom. I relaunched my marketing firm. The first few months were hard, but my old drive, the ambition that Genevieve had found so distasteful, came roaring back. My work became my focus, my passion, and my company is thriving. I am, once again, the architect of my own life. I thought about Jax often. I would sometimes take his business card out and look at it, but I never called. His appearance in my life had been a catalyst, a dramatic, shocking intervention. But he was a ghost from my past, and I was focused on my future. Then, about 3 months ago, I was at a coffee shop, meeting with a new client, and I heard a familiar voice behind me. Isla. I turned. It was him. He was in civilian clothes jeans and a simple gray t-shirt. He looked more relaxed, younger. The hard, military edge was softened. Jax, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. We ended up talking for 2 hours. It wasn't awkward. It was easy. We talked about our lives, the strange, parallel paths we had taken. He told me about building his security company from the ground up after he left the service, the challenges, the successes. I told him about my divorce, about restarting my own company. There was no talk of rekindling what we had. We were 2 different people now, 2 veterans of our own separate wars. But there was a deep, abiding respect, a quiet understanding. You know, I said to him as we were about to leave, for a long time, I thought you were my great tragedy, the one that got away. He gave me that slow, familiar smile. And now, I think you were my greatest teacher, I said. You taught me what real strength looks like, and you showed up at exactly the moment I needed to be reminded of it. He just nodded. You didn't need me to rescue you, Isla. You just needed someone to hold the door open while you rescued yourself. And he was right. Jax hadn't rescued me from my life. He had just rescued me from a single, terrible moment. His intervention had been the shock to my system that I needed, the mirror that showed me how far I had strayed from the strong, independent woman I used to be. He had reminded me of my own power. The real rescue was the one I performed for myself in the days, weeks, and months that followed. I was the one who walked out of the marriage. I was the one who built a new life. I had been my own hero all along. And so I leave you with this. Sometimes, we find ourselves in gilded cages. They can be beautiful, comfortable, and safe. But they are still cages. And we wait for a rescuer, a knight in shining armor to come and break down the door. But the truth is, most of the time, the only person who can truly set you free is you. The door is not always locked. You just have to have the courage to stand up, turn the handle, and walk out into the sunlight on your own. Thank you for listening. If you have ever had to be your own hero, if you've ever had to rescue yourself, I would love to hear your story in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in the strength that lies within you. And remember, a gilded cage is still a cage. Find your own sky.